3, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Climate Change Issues and asks, is he aware of any ongoing fiscal risks to the Crown resulting from the operation of the emissions trading scheme?
Honourable Tim Grosser.
Well, the term fiscal risk has a very specific meaning in terms of the Public Finance Act, and all the fiscal risks from whatever source are listed in the budget documents. But I checked with the Treasurer an hour ago, and they assured me that there is no risk associated specifically with climate change.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has he seen any reports that firms to which the government has allocated free New Zealand carbon units are engaging in arbitrage using cheap international carbon units to meet their New Zealand obligations under the emissions trading scheme?
Honourable Tim Grosser.
Well, I'm aware of many reports on this issue, including reports relating to a rort that this government has put a stop to, which involved the use of taxpayer funds to put money in people's pockets on the re-regulation arbitrage opportunities. So I don't know whether he's referring to that or some other aspect of the ETS.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question was about firms that have been allocated free New Zealand carbon units, which didn't apply to the re-registration arbitrage to which the Minister referred.
The question was, has the Minister received any reports? And he responded that he received many reports.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there anything to stop firms that receive New Zealand carbon units each year as free allocations from selling these units and then using cheaper international units to meet their greenhouse obligations in New Zealand?
Honourable Tim Grosser.
Mr. Speaker, the scheme has been designed so that people can minimise their cost in meeting those obligations within the framework of the Climate Change Response Act. Even, should I add this, foresters who remain in the scheme can still use cheaper international units, although we have stopped the inclusion of units of questionable environmental integrity.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then it is correct that the 33 million carbon units that were gifted to firms in New Zealand last year at the taxpayers' expense, these firms can sell these units at about $4 each currently, and then buy cheap offshore units for about 20 cents each, and then use the offshore units to cover their emissions in New Zealand.
Honourable Tim
Mr. Speaker, the existing structure of the scheme remains as I described. If people wish to maximise their fiscal position in the way set out by the Act, they will do so, and this government is quite happy with the situation as it stands.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Then the Minister agrees that firms which receive free allocations of New Zealand carbon units then sell those units for a profit while meeting their ETS obligation using cheap offshore units are effectively being paid to produce greenhouse pollution paid by the taxpayer.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Tim Grosser.
No. We have set up a scheme which allows people to meet their obligations in ways that the scheme is designed to ensure we do not put them out of business. But I'm quite confident that in the event that the member has decisive influence on climate change policy, we will have to revise that opinion.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Does he believe that the purpose of the emissions trading scheme is actually being served when it results in polluters being subsidised by taxpayers to actually produce pollution, as is now the case, using these loopholes in the law?
Mr. Speaker, no, that is a complete mischaracterisation of the scheme. What we are trying to do is to ensure that people move slowly in this direction of lower carbon emissions. It is, of course, complicated by the very low international price at the moment, and give them ways of adjusting that. If we had put the full burden, or the previous government had put the full burden of the adjustment process on without giving them some offsetting units, we believe, as no doubt the previous government also believed, that it would have driven the process in too fast in the wrong direction. But we know the Green Party has no concern whatsoever for the productive side of our economy.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Will the Minister tell us the names of the firms to which he gave free allocation of New Zealand carbon units in the last year and how much each company received? Or is this information kept secret from New Zealanders even though they are paying for the units?
Honourable Tim Grosser.
Mr Speaker, I personally do not sit behind a desk doling out money and units to individual firms. It is done by responsible public service.
Supplementary question, Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister not think it's only fair that New Zealand taxpayers who are paying for these free allocations are entitled to know who the allocations are going to that the Minister is responsible for giving away as free allocations?
Honourable Tim Grosser.
Mr Speaker, I think the details of this are done deliberately by officials responsible for the registrar. I do not think you want company confidential information sprayed around the New Zealand public without regard to their own financial position.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr Russell Norman.
Is this not yet another example of his government's dodgy backroom deals at the expense of ordinary New Zealanders who are never told the names of the companies who receive hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer carbon credits? Is this just another form of the Cabinet Club for polluters?
The question's been asked. We'll allow the Minister to answer.
Mr Speaker, the short answer is no, but there's a deeper issue of principle. Is the member suggesting, as it clearly is inferred by the question, that from the point of view of any government he's going to belong to in the future, he's going to put around highly confidential company information on their tax burdens and other such matters without any regard for the impact on their financial position? The member should reflect on that.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Has the Minister seen any reports of how the climate changed when the leader of the Green Party went up to the .com mansion and was grovelling around looking to a special backroom deal when it came to extradition?
I don't see any ministerial responsibility for that. Order. Question number 4, Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree that